For over a decade, I shopped and worked at my local comic shop. One of the best parts about hanging out there was comparing notes on what I was reading with folks who shared my passion for comics. My comic shop is gone now, but we can still hold on to the magic of that in-store discussion. This is My Comic Shop Book Club. Welcome to My Comic Shop Book Club. I am your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to discuss the Parker graphic novel adaptations by the late, great Darwyn Cooke is one of my dearest friends from our old comic shop, Alternate Realities, Dr. Bill Maio.
Hey, Anthony. Thanks for letting me join you on this one. I'm really excited by the idea of talking about these books with you.
I'm glad that you were on board to do it. I think we'll have a great conversation. And what's funny is I was thinking about this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but for all of the time that you and I spent hanging out at Alternate Realities, I don't know that we spent that much of it talking about comic books. And that was always one of the special things about the store, right? That we had a lot of other interests, besides just comics. But that being said, you might expect a fair amount of comics talk. And I don't know that we ever did a ton of that, you and I.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Although your intro is right on point. As employees, we would oftentimes engage the customers and friends of the store, and I feel like we talk comic books quite a bit at the store, with making recommendations and things like that. And maybe this was before your time, but when Brandon was an owner, he would let us take the comic books for free. Steve, if you're listening, don't say anything. But Brandon would say, take your comic books for home for free if you're going to be able to suggest it to one other customer. And in his mind, it paid for itself then. But I always viewed that so you would be exploratory. You would look and find things that you wouldn't normally pick up, and sometimes you would stumble on something great.
Yeah, for sure. And you're referring to former co-owner of Alternate Realities, Brandon Montclair, who's gone on to have a career as an editor and as a writer. And that was kind of before my time, that whole bit about bringing books home. But I think it makes perfect sense, and I think that's really cool. So we are going to be talking, as I said, about Darwyn Cooke's adaptations of the Parker books. So there were these novels, of course, written by Donald Westlake under the pen name Richard Stark, right? So there was this novel character, and then Darwyn Cooke adapted 4 of the stories. So the 4 volumes that we're talking about are The Hunter, The Outfit, The Score, and Slayground. And, there were plans for more. Unfortunately, Darwyn Cooke passed before that could come to pass. But this was a really fascinating reading experience for me for reasons, we can talk about. But I'm curious what your experience was. And you actually went a step beyond me because you read, and I was blown away that you even wanted to do this. I really, really appreciated it. But you actually read one of is this the first Parker novel?
Right. So I went and tracked down The Hunter so I would be able to compare directly with the first graphic novel. And, Anthony, I read these books when they first came out. Well, maybe they were 10 years ago. I don't even know what the copyright date on these things are.
Yeah, I think the first one was 2009.
2009. Yeah. So it was right before I left pretty much to come out here to New Mexico. I left in 2010, so I would have been still coming to the store. I probably bought this copy at Alternate Realities. And I remember when I read them, they were just incredible, right? I really just got drawn into the story, a little bit different than anything I had read before. By the end of my comic book kind of career, I had veered off from superhero books, and I was kind of into the independent stuff anyway. So this really drew me in for sure. But in going back to read them again for this podcast, I really wanted to see how they compared to the novelization. And I wasn't going to be able to do all 4, but I figured I would at least start with the first one and just see, where Darwyn got the inspiration for doing something like this. What I think is kind of amazing is you think of Darwyn Cooke, immediately you think of New Frontier, right? Something that he wrote and he did the art for. This is quite different, right? So he has the story, and now he's the storyteller in just art form. And I was kind of curious to see how he adapted it. In reading a page from this and then reading a page from this man is the most amazing, storyboard artist that you can. I was blown away, absolutely blown away. Insofar as I feel like this novel was like the key to understanding a lot of the panels in this book, right? So, there's a lot that goes into storytelling. I don't know if you ever read that book by Scott McCloud on like understanding comics. It's a really cool
I
book.
haven't. I mean, I certainly know of it. I remember seeing it at the comic shop. Yeah, I can't say that I ever read the entire
Well,
thing.
it's an interesting rate, and he talks about like what happens in between the panels, and how much you can actually pack into a panel. And a lot of the panels in the Parker novels are no text, right? There's some action going on, and so often in like reading a comic book, like a superhero comic book, I think me, you, Rich, a lot of people just joke you can read a modern comic book in 10 seconds, right? Because it's just like splash page, junk, 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 junk. But there was so much that went into each one of these panels. Like he'll take a page from this novel and turn it into a panel in the book. Like how he might just like how might Richard Stark might have described the scene, right? And then you see how Darwyn, basically acted it out on paper. It was just incredible. We could talk more about that in a second, but I had never seen Darwyn um, in that capacity before. Because really, I read a lot of Darwin stuff, but I feel like it's the stuff that he did himself, where he wrote it. He had his own idea in his head, but this was quite different, and I think he excelled at it.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I agree with that, even without having read the novel. And I wish I had. I'm sure. I mean, it sounds like you got a lot out of being able to compare the two. And maybe at some point I would go back and read
Yeah,
at least one of the novels because I think it would be really interesting. But, it's funny that you mentioned that, people probably, think of New Frontier when they think of Darwyn Cooke. And, that's the thing in selecting these books for this book club, and we're still relatively early on in this book club podcast. It would have been real easy to just go right into New Frontier,
right.
or even his Catwoman run. Some of the more recognizable superhero work that he did, and like we'll get to all of that
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
later on in the podcast series. But I really thought like it would be cool. I mean, I know these are certainly well known, but I think that probably among the general comics fans, if there are works of Cooke's that they haven't read, there's a decent chance that these books might be in that category. And so I thought it would be cool to kind of shine a light on, really his final works and really powerful, really strong. I mean, I can't stress how much I enjoyed my reading project. It was
Yeah,
such a
yeah.
blast.
It's unlike other books you've read before, right? Because you're not always rooting for the anti-hero, right? And Parker is very much that anti-hero. He's a guy that you really should hate, but you're rooting for him the entire time. The first two novels are very intertwined in terms of the story. It's really one story broken up over two novels. Um, but you really get the sense where he deserves this revenge that's against the guy who double crossed him, and then well beyond that guy and into the outfit that wronged him and by accepting the money that wasn't rightfully theirs. Um, but it was just the whole time you're just like, man, this guy's killing people. This guy mercilessly killed this poor girl that didn't even deserve it. He kind of has remorse, but not really. But then you're just like, I hope he gets the guy. You're just rooting for him the whole time, and that's just not a common thing in media, I think.
Exactly. I know that was a really fascinating aspect of this. And I think that's a testament to both creators, to Donald Westlake and to Darwyn Cooke to, have you rooting for this character who, really you probably shouldn't be. But, within the context of the story, I mean, these are hard boiled crime fiction stories, no doubt about it.
Yeah,
But, within that, it's all relative. So I feel like with Parker, he does seem to have somewhat of a code. And, he is violent, but he's not sadistic about it. And it's not unnecessary. In his mind, I guess it's not unnecessary. He doesn't kill unless he has to.
right.
Right. Or in the case of, his quest for revenge, where, it really is, justified, at least from
Yeah,
his perspective,
yeah,
but like, he's not presented as as a monster and held up against, these people these other criminals who have betrayed him.
right.
Yeah. I mean, you really do find yourself rooting for him for sure.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. And you know, most of the people that he interacts with know him, right? And they know his backstory. And in some cases, they're terrified of this guy. And so we don't know the whole backstory of Parker. The novel talks about how he's been doing this for 18 years, which is basically he has this routine where he pulls one or two jobs a year, kind of just to make money to float him for the rest of the year. But I guess he works with so many nefarious characters in the crime world that everybody knows Parker to the point where they're all scared of this guy, except the outfit guys who don't know him yet, and then they fear him, sure, towards the end, and what he's capable of. It's nice, like the one man army kind of taking on the big corporation, so to speak. Except in this case, the corporation's like the mob.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
So this was interesting because I guess just to talk about Darwyn Cooke himself for a little bit. So I think I first met him through his work with the backup stories in Detective Comics that he did with Ed Brubaker, the Slam Bradley shorts that led into Selina's Big Score, followed by the first few issues of the Catwoman ongoing series that he drew with Ed Brubaker. So that was really my introduction to his work. And so, I was there and on board when New Frontier came out. And, to this day, it is one of my all-time favorite comic book stories. Again, we'll cover it on the podcast down the line. And then, over the years, I've read, most of his other comic book work, as I think most fans know, and it's included in his bio, in the graphic novels, he had a very successful career in animation. He famously did the storyboard art for the opening sequence to Batman Beyond, which was very distinct, very iconic. Oh, yeah. And then he segued into comics and created all these wonderful works. But I think because he started a bit later and his passing was so untimely, when you look at his comic book bibliography, I mean, there's a ton of cover work, but when you're talking about interiors, it's not that voluminous, really. So much so that, when we were trying to decide what to pick for this episode, like I sent you a list of all of his stuff and, there's a lot, but it was, not an unmanageable list. So again, I've already read most of his stuff, not all of it. And there are a couple of other things that I'm looking forward to discovering for the first time. And that was one of the things that was so special about this reading project, because I had read the first volume of Parker when it came out and I enjoyed it. I don't think I fully appreciated it the way I did this time, but I did enjoy it. And I bought volumes 2 through 4. And it was one of those cases, those classic instances of it sitting on the shelf for literally a decade. And, just kind of always intending to get to it, but not getting to it until now. But it ended up, it felt like such a gift to be able to read these now, because it was new to me, Darwyn Cooke work. And that was something that, you wouldn't come across again. So that was really special.
Yeah, I mean, I tell you, I read these when they first came out. I was a big fan, so much so that I got an original piece of artwork from Darwyn of Hunter, because I loved the story so much. But having said that, 10 years go by, Anthony, they've been sitting on my shelf, and I read them again, and I was like, I don't even remember reading these. It was like reading them for the first time. And I think a lot of stuff that I keep, I always like to, every few years, take another read. Like a year doesn't go by that I don't read like The Dark Knight Returns and things like that, some really key books. And I feel like you always discover something. And, I'm glad that you took these off the shelf and read them, and it was probably the right time. Had you read them a couple of years ago, maybe you wouldn't have gotten the same sort of punch or feeling out of him as he did now. Darwyn is a great guy. Talking about his untimely passing, I remember when he announced that he had cancer on Facebook, he was dead a week later. It was a really sad time. It was unexpected. I was sort of in his crowd, but not in his main crowd. So some of the guys like Ben DeFeo, Jim Clancy, Randy House, I don't know if you know these guys. They're like big art collectors from back in the day that I was friends with. And I was part of like the Phil Noto crowd, Brian Stelfreeze, Adam Hughes. Darwyn Cooke was, Darwyn, you love Darwyn, but I was never part of that clique. Like those guys got to go to his wedding and really became more than fans. They became, his friends. I don't know if you read and by the way, Jim Clancy used to be a customer at Alternate Realities.
Yeah, so I definitely know. Yes, I know Jim Clancy.
Did you see him in the acknowledgments?
I saw him in the acknowledgments. I saw him in the book.
Yeah, he's in the book. It's crazy, right?
Yeah, like
I meant to call
prominently.
Him. I meant
pretty
to call
prominently,
him.
Actually.
Yeah, I was trying to call him, but I couldn't get to. But Jim was actually the guy who got me the Darwyn Cooke artwork, and so Jim was part of the crowd. And I forgot what it was, but he won like a chance to go to lunch with him. But he was always already friends with him, and it was like lunch plus Darwyn will do an art piece for you. While you're sitting at the table. And Jim was like, I don't even want the art. I just want to go to lunch with Darwyn. What do you want? I said, oh, do Parker with a girl, and she has to have granny panties on. He's like, okay.
Yeah, for people watching the video version of this, Bill is holding up the artwork right now.
There you go. And it's wonderful, right? I mean, at the time, I loved Parker, and I still do, and especially more so, after having read these. And I'm going to be honest with you, I feel like The Hunter and The Outfit are two that I will pick up and read again. Whereas the Slayground and also The Score, they didn't have quite the same impact on me as the other novel did. I feel like I was saying before, the other two are just like reading one story over two parts, and it's a great story about revenge, and there's this betrayal from a wife in it, to like one of his co-conspirators on a heist, and it goes all the way up the chain, and it's such a great story, and it's self-contained. Whereas the other ones are, Parker in a different light. He's on a heist, he's with the new crew, and it's a completely different aspect of him as a character and how he interacts with people. And then Slayground, I really wasn't the biggest fan of. It was kind of a strange thing. And you had mentioned that there was 4 novels that he adapted, but there's a 5th at the end of Slayground. I don't know if you noticed, but the 7th is actually a very short adaptation of the 7th Parker novel that's in here as well.
Right.
Not that it makes much of a difference.
No, but that's a good catch. It's funny that you say that, because I had a very similar take. I think you can really draw a line between the first 2 and the second 2. And like you, I definitely got more out of The Hunter and The Outfit, for the reasons that you said. I mean, and it was so personal, right? He was on this quest for revenge. Like you said, he had been betrayed by his wife, one of his co-conspirators. And he, like you said, he took it all the way up the chain to the top of this criminal organization, The Outfit.
Yeah.
And, he gets them to buy him off. He has to go to great lengths to do that, but then they keep coming after him, and he lets them have it.
Yeah.
And it's, again, going back to what you were saying before, it's like, this visceral thrill in watching him, enact his plan and get his revenge. And then, with the Score, I mean, it's all about this heist to knock off this town. Like an entire town.
Yeah. It's a very ambitious plot.
Yeah, and but that's the thing. Like it's a cool story. And then I actually I thought Slayground was cool, but there wasn't as much, and it was the shortest of all of them. Like that was
so quick. Like the first, they're all broken up into 4 books, and that one, I think 3 pages in, you're into book 2. You're like, oh, what was this?
Yeah,
so fast. It's like, all right.
I'll admit. So with these various book club podcasts, it's kind of varied for me. Sometimes I've been on top of my homework and I've had the reading done in advance, and in other instances it's like I'm back in school and it's like down to the wire.
Yeah.
And this happened to be a busy work week for me, and for various reasons I was a bit behind, and so I don't think I read the Hunter until, I don't know, Tuesday or Wednesday. Like we were getting late into the week here, and it took me a little while. I mean, I read it in one night, but it took me a little while. I'm like, man, I got like 3 more of these. But by the time you get to the Score, the Score and Slayground were a lot breezier.
Yeah.
And a lot less dense. I felt like they moved a lot faster. And
it wasn't a story that you had to pay attention to either. It was really just a page turner. You're like, oh, okay, this is Parker killing people, this is Parker robbing a bank, this is, whatever. Whereas the other one's like, there's this convoluted plot, and you're trying to keep track of all these characters, because there's a lot of characters in the first 2 books. And, I think it's rewarding if you are able to sit down and really pay attention to what you're reading versus just having a passive, I'll just flip through the pages right before bed. It's a good story in those 2 books. Yeah.
I mean, I think that, because, when I was done, I really, again, I was like, oh, like I was, I don't know if maybe I was hoping for a little more in those second 2, but reflecting on it for really only a few hours, because I just finished earlier today, but I feel like, it really shows, all the different types of stories that you can tell with Parker. And I think that, they stand out more and they stand apart from the others because we only have these 4 that he did. I think, if he had gone on and he had ended up, with 6 or 8 or 10 of these,
right.
Then it's like, cool, like you get like all these different types of stories, but since we have so few, it's like, oh, like you just like, you just want more. But, but I love the fact that looking at the 4 of them as a whole, you do get these different types of stories, and yeah, they do read a little bit differently, but all enjoyable in their own way.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, I was a bit behind in my reading, but I got everything done. But two funny quick things that I'll just mention. One is that, like I said, these have been sitting on my shelf for such a long time. And when my wife and I got married, almost 5 years ago now, I brought these 4 hardcovers on our honeymoon to Hawaii, packed them in my luggage, and I was like, all right, like sitting by the pool, I'll have some time, I'll read them. Never cracked them open. No, took them halfway, around the world, and that,
I
yeah.
love it.
So,
Well,
so
they're
there's
well
that.
traveled.
They are well traveled. You know what? At that point, I was
You got a lot of
part
other
of me.
things going on.
Well, that's true. But but I mean, there was lounging by the pool. I could have done it, but I just didn't. And at that point, part of me felt like if you didn't read it then, when you made the effort to pack them and bring them, it's like you might just never get to these. So that's why I'm grateful for this podcast. And then the second funny little thing, in the context of this podcast, the recording and release order are not always the same. So the last reading project that I had before this one was Red Hulk by Jeff Loeb, and
A little disappointing.
yeah, a little more than a little disappointing. And so this was such a wonderful palate cleanser.
Restore your faith in comics.
Yeah, I mean, like dark and gritty and and again, like rooted in the real world. Like it was just such a fun change of pace after that. So I really had a great time reading these.
Yeah. And like I said, if you ever get the chance to read the novel, the way I was doing it was I was reading, 2 or 3 chapters in the novel and then go back and I would go back to the graphic novel because the novel is broken up into the books, the 4 books, and then chapters within the books. And so I would read a couple of chapters and then I would see how Darwyn adapted it. And I would read a couple of chapters and see how he adapted it. And I think it's kind of incredible because he's following the story so faithfully that, you really get a sense that, it's like looking into Darwyn's mind. Like, obviously, he was a fan of this novel, of Richard Starr. I don't think he just decided one day to pick the Parker novels. I'm sure he was obsessed with these books for a long time. Maybe he read them when he was a kid, throughout his life. I feel like, paperbacks like this were very common, where people would just, buy them, sit on the subway, and read them. And so, who knows how many times he read, The Hunter, but to see it from his mind now on paper, Richard Stark wrote the words. I mean, the dialogue is the same with some exceptions. I mean, I think it's really funny how he cleaned up. This is much grittier, by the way.
Okay.
It's much more adult than the Darwyn. Darwyn definitely toned it down. At one point they have to go get the guns. I think part of the heist that gets him in trouble with this guy Mal is this heist where they have to go to this island off the coast of wherever it was, Canada or something, and get these guns. And there were the rebels, right, in the book, but he calls them the Fidelistas in this, which I think is probably a term that you probably don't want to use nowadays, although I don't think it's derogatory, but I've never heard it. So things like that, or this is very over-sexualized, right? And so some of the scenes with Lynn, when he first sees Lynn and he's like, really manhandling her, and then she kills herself from an overdose, he describes at length how she's laying on the bed with her breasts hanging out, essentially things like that Darwyn kind of, did his best to interpret, but cleaned it up for, a child's audience. And I think that's okay, which I really like to see. The book it's not just, has extra stuff in this book that his graphic novel doesn't pick up on. There's actually a couple of storylines as well. One of them is really fun. I think you'll enjoy. Is it okay that we talk about this?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm so curious to, again, I appreciate you taking the time and doing the heavy lifting on that. So I'm so curious to hear what that reading experience was like. And
so there's for it. Yeah. There's a whole extra kind of 2 scenes that are separated, one in the middle of the book and one at the end of the book, where Parker is looking for Mal. He can't find Mal. And so he's going through all these characters like Sedgwick, which he winds up killing later. But on his, quest from person to person, he goes and he finds this guy, Delgado or something like that. I can't think of the guy's name offhand, but he owns a bodega. And so he goes to this bodega and he's like hitting him up for information. And these cops walk in for an unrelated incident. They see Parker and they look suspicious. So they ask him all sorts of questions. And he gives them the phony name because he has got his phony license and his whole backstory. And the cops don't buy it, but they buy it enough to let him go. But surprisingly, later on in the book, after he gets his revenge, the outfit has given him his ransom money, essentially his money back that Mal stole and then paid the outfit with. he loses the money. So the cops show back up, and he's forced to, run. He's got two suitcases. One has his clothes, the other one has the money, and he takes the wrong suitcase. He takes the suitcase with the laundry. And so when he finally opens the suitcase, he realizes he's lost all that money that he took this entire novel to get back, right? And so there's one extra chapter now at the end of this book that's not included in this book where he hits the operation or the outfit one more time. And he said, "This is for interest on the loan that I gave you." It's like he's a baller. I mean, at the end of the day, he's like, "Oh, by the way, thanks for the money, but you had it for this long, I'm going to get interest on it. I just hit your casino," or whatever he hits. And I just think it's really funny. It's a really nice ending that's in this one. And I don't know if Darwyn ran out of pages or he decided that it was not a really important thing to include. But I thought it was a really interesting way to end that novel as opposed to the book.
That is really fascinating. I mean, the art of adaptation, I've never done it, but I would imagine it's really kind of tricky. And, Darwyn's been on the other side of it, right? So his magnum opus, right, New Frontier, he actually wrote the animated adaptation.
Yeah.
But that was at the point in time when all those DC cartoons were kept to about 75 minutes. Now, I don't know if they so much have more flexibility with runtime, but they've been doing a lot more two-part movies. Like they adapted Dark Knight Returns into 2 parts and The Death and Return of Superman. Stories that really need more than, an hour and change to breathe.
Yeah.
But at the time, he had to boil down New Frontier. That must have been an especially tricky thing to adapt your own work.
Oh, for sure.
But I actually quite, that's a separate conversation, but I actually really quite liked the way he was able to distill New Frontier down to what we got in the cartoon. But here he's adapting someone else's work. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure a lot of tough choices. I mean, based on what you're describing, I think you probably made the right call on that. I mean, I feel like that might have been like a bridge too far.
It's too much.
It's a little bit much, yeah.
But it's funny nonetheless, and talking about adaptation, it's certainly an art, right? And I think having read the novel and then read Darwyn's adaptation, he excels at this art. He was able to read the novel, distill the important parts, and then faithfully retell his story. Is it okay if I just show a couple of pages?
Yes.
Before
cool? You do, let me just say, it's you showed before we started recording. You showed me your notes that you took in the book.
So
for all the comic book fans out there, Bill wrote in his books. They're no longer mint.
I didn't know. Well, first of all, 2 things. The first thing is I looked up how much the Hunter costs on eBay. It's a $10 book, right? So I wasn't like heartbroken. And secondly, I really didn't know what the nature of our discussion would be today. So I wanted to take notes about what's the same and what's different between the two. And I had a good time doing that. And I wrote in this book and this book, at the same time. But I want to draw attention to just the early chapters of this book. Now, I don't know if you read anything about Darwyn and Donald Westlake, but apparently they became friends over Parker. And if I read the Wikipedia page for Donald Westlake, and apparently Parker, especially this book, Hunter, has been adapted a number of times. Not only the one that Rich Roney has talked about, Point Blank, with Lee Marvin, but some other times as well. I think there was a Mel Gibson adaptation, and who's that guy with the really gravelly voice?
There's a Jason Statham. Most recently, yeah.
But in all of those adaptations, he did not give permission to use the term Parker, right? And so that was an interesting point. But Darwyn got the permission, and I would like to believe, and I have no basis of this, that he showed Donald Westlake the first few pages of his novel. I have to believe that because this is such an incredible retelling of the first chapter in the book, right? So the first chapter is all about Parker is essentially, for those of you guys who haven't read it or maybe excited to read it, the basic backstory is the heist went bad, right? And the 2 guys that he pulled the heist with convinced his wife to murder him and leave him for dead. And then he obviously wasn't killed. And he is, later on he escapes from the house that they lit on fire that he was in. He's stumbling around and the cops pick him up and they bring him to the farm. I don't necessarily know what the farm is, but it's some kind of prison, maybe like a chain gang situation. He was on that farm for 5 months before he got back out. And then once he's out, he's now picking up where he left off, right? And so this chapter 1 begins right there. And he's back in New York and he needs an identity, right? He needs money. And the book goes into great detail on how he's doing it, and largely the first few pages, there's almost no dialogue. But when you look at these pages, and again, like I was saying, there's so much information in each panel that you don't even get. Like, for example, Donald Westlake talks about the hole in his shoe, and Darwyn puts that hole, right there. He talks about throwing a cigarette over the bridge, and there he's doing it. He does a whole pack in this thing, but still, true to the story. He's walking down this bridge. He draws so much attention in the book to this woman who is terrified just by the sight of Parker, trying to establish, how menacing of a figure he is. And, again, I think Darwyn does a great job. There's no dialogue, no, remember like a Silver Age comic would have like a huge, like, meanwhile, talking about this scene. None of that. But you get the sense, right? Maybe you glass over it really quick, but when you have the novel with you and you see it, you're like, oh my goodness, And then he talks about all these people on the street that are watching him. Some of the really nice things that I like. So this whole scene is represented, but this scene is so wonderful in the novel. So he goes into a diner, and this girl is flirting with him, and he's talking about how she's showing her breasts and really trying to like flirt with him because she wants to get a nice tip out of Parker, right? And so Parker doesn't leave the good tip. She's doing her best. He doesn't leave a good tip, right? So she sees the quarter thrown at her, and in the book she does the same thing. She throws the tip and the cup into the the trash, and like there it is. But there's no indication. If you don't know from reading the book, it's hard to even understand what she's doing. But there it is. It's like so faithful. Retelling of this Donald Westlake story. And I don't need to go in any further, but this whole scene where he's getting his license and forging the license, then he goes to the bathroom, tucks in his dirty shirt, and he emerges at the end of this as like, the hero. He looks like this, he cuts a dashing, whatever they call it, the figure he cuts at the end. I mean, he was like a derelict at the beginning, and, he cleans up real nice. And then really quickly, just to skip a few pages, this is super wonderful too, because when you meet Lynn is the wife that betrayed him. She thinks he's dead. And he walks in on her and he immediately slaps her in the face. She's on the floor, and you can imagine the terror that she has. And, obviously Donald Westlake tells you right away, this is his wife. So right away in the novel, but you don't know for pages. I don't remember when it's revealed here. I'm sorry if I'm taking up too much of this.
Go for it, man. I love it.
But I mean, when you find out it's his wife and then you read it from that perspective, you're like, you could only imagine what the fear that she has. And this scene makes so much more sense, right? She's like, are you going to kill me? He's like, that depends on you. And she says things like, I wasn't a whore, Parker. He's like, no, you sold my body instead. I mean, great dialogue in this scene. And it, again, this book is just, like you said, it's just such a, like watching a film noir novelization or crime, something. It's like watching Goodfellas or something. This book, it's such a good. Anyway, I'll stop. But I really enjoyed it.
Listen, this is what we're here for. Let's just take a 30-second commercial break, and then I want more of this, man. We'll be right back. Movie lovers should check out this family of film festivals: the Brightside Tavern Film Festival in Jersey City, the Hang On to Your Shorts Film Festival in Asbury Park, and the Point Lookout Film Festival on Long Island. Submission information for filmmakers, as well as details about the festivals generally, can be found at filmfreeway.com. Also, be sure to listen to the podcasts hosted by the festival's organizer, CJ Cullen. You can find the official Hang On to Your Shorts podcast, as well as the Cullen on Film podcast, via a shared universe network. All right, and we're back. It's what's really funny, man, is that you are now the third teacher I've had on this book club podcast, and I think the non-teachers have been wonderful as well. But I really think like there's something to that, and like when you're holding up the book and you go page by page, I'm like, hey, it's like teaching a class on this. This would be a great class, man.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can definitely have a lecture or two on this novel. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's great stuff. So yeah, that was really the main thing I was curious about, was how faithful it was. And, from everything you've described, it was,
like mind-blowingly,
really exceedingly faithful.
Mind-blowingly. One of the things that's really interesting, I had taken notes on it. Let's see, you open up the first page and it has some just quotes from the book or lines from the book. And the first thing you see is the Judas ooh, or the you, right? You ever heard that term?
No, I can't say that I have.
Yeah. So I had to look it up because it describes it right here. Lynn was his wife, but she played the Judas U by setting him up for the slaughter. So apparently the Judas U is, at a slaughterhouse, they have a goat that leads the other goats to the slaughterhouse. That's the Judas U.
Ah.
And it makes so much sense in the context of, Lynn and how her role in this whole setting him up and everything. So I learned something very nice there. Not that I'll ever use that in vernacular, but it's an interesting term. I feel like there's a lot of
Listen,
that here. There's a lot of like gritty 1960s vernacular that I'm not familiar with. And I picked up from reading it.
yeah, no, that's really cool. You took us through the opening sequence of The Hunter, and it was, again, even without having read the novel, it was so impactful reading those first few pages because it pulls you in immediately. It instantly establishes who this character is. I mean, he's walking across the George Washington Bridge,
Yeah.
and someone offers him a ride, and his first words are "Go to hell," and it's like, all right, like we know who this guy is, and
Yeah.
it's perfect. And so this was one of the main things that I appreciated so much about this was the way Cooke used the art to tell the story. Because as we've been friends for a long time, and as listeners know, I certainly appreciate and understand the importance and the value of art in a visual medium. Like, I get it. But that being said, I've always gravitated more to writers and the story, and to the point where, I'll suffer through art that I don't really like because I'm interested in the writer or the story. I follow writers more.
Right.
But looking at this, and especially all of these long sequences where there's no text and no dialogue, and it's just the art telling the story, it just really made me appreciate how brilliant he was at sequential storytelling, sequential art like that. And, to your point, it's like, no, I didn't have, the background from the novel, but it forced me to pay. That was the thing. I really noticed that I was paying much closer attention to the art. I mean, I always take it in, but I was really looking at it a lot more closely because you don't have anything else to rely on. And it's like, okay, you're all these little character moments and beats, and it's like, you want to make sure you get it, exactly the stuff that you were mentioning.
Oh yeah. And again, it's kind of amazing to see what he saw in his head with, when he read this book. And I really feel like he put it on paper. And that's why I say I have no basis on fact, but I feel like he would have shown Donald Westlake those first few pages, and he probably was like, "Oh, by all means, do all of my books," because it was perfect. It was just 100% him retelling that story, and well done, by the way. And to credit to Donald Westlake, this was an incredible story. We've all seen these, maybe listeners at home are thinking, "Oh, it's just some crime novel." Whatnot. There's some twists. There's some very interesting things that come out of these books that I've never seen before in terms of convention. Like, one that was really nice was, again, he's trying to get his money back from the outfit, and then at one point he gets his money back, and now the goal is to get the outfit to stop trying to kill him, because basically it's like the outfit's like, well, here's the money. So again, for those of you who haven't read it that are interested in reading it. This guy Mal that double crosses him with his wife steals the money that he was owed from this job. Then this guy Mal uses that money to pay off the outfit, which is the mafia essentially, because he owed them a debt. And so he kills Mal, again because he double crossed him, but now he wants his money. So he goes to the outfit and he says, "Listen, guys, he paid you with my money, not his money." And they're like, "Well, you." There's nothing we can do about that.
Not our problem, buddy.
Not our problem. Yeah. But he makes it their problem. And he eventually gets them to pay. I think that's incredible. But at the end of that novel, the first novel, they're basically like, well, here's your money, but you're a marked man, right? So the first thing he does, he gets plastic surgery. So the second book opens up, he's got a new face, but unfortunately he gets marked by the guy he does the next job with. So now the outfit know where to get him, and their outfit are coming after him. And so now the goal is to get the top brass at the outfit killed, so they'll stop hunting him. But I think one of the greatest things is he goes to one of these top bosses and he's like, "Listen, if I kill this guy under you or over you, do you take his role? And would you be cool with me doing that?" He's like, "Yeah, by all means, go ahead." It's like such an interesting plot point. When he does that, he's on the phone. You're just like, I can't believe he's doing this. This guy's a baller. And then he, stages the attack on this guy's house to kill him. Oh, it's such a great story. Like I said, the first two books I will read again and enjoy over and over.
Yeah, this guy's got a real pair on him, and it's great to watch. That too was probably one of my favorite moments. When he's dealing with like one of the top guys, Fairfax, I think, and
Yeah.
and he wants a line on the top guy, Bronson, and he's like, okay, and like you said, he's like, okay, so who's next in line
Yeah.
if I take out Bronson? And he's
Yeah.
able to get that guy's name, and the guy's like,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, like I
I
would
have
be
his name
grateful if that
somewhere.
happened.
Yeah. I have his name somewhere. I don't know. Carnes. He calls Carnes. That's the guy's
Uh,
name to discuss killing Bronson. And it's like, and then at the very end, it's so great. So the guy, Carnes basically says, hey, this is where you can go get Bronson. You kill him, I'll be happy because I'll take over. And then, you know, after all that, he pays Carnes money for basically fingering the guy because
Yeah.
not only did he kill this head of the outfit, but he robbed everything that he had in the house. And then the other
Yeah.
guy was entitled to part of the loot.
The finger gets 10%, as we learn.
Gets 10%. I learned that.
Yeah. Yeah, you learn a lot of lingo, and in that second book in particular, there's this lengthy sequence. There are these little vignettes, and Cook utilizes different
Art
styles
styles.
and
Yeah.
storytelling devices for this sequence. But sort of the gist of it is that at this point, where the outfits continue to come after him after he's warned them, he's like, all bets are off, and so he puts the word out to his entire network, because traditionally they wouldn't hit outfit operations, right? But now he's like, listen, it's fair game, like go after them. And so like all of these places are getting hit,
Yeah.
and you get like a really interesting lesson in how a lot of these illegal operations work.
Well,
like racetrack betting, fascinating.
he does a great job at, describing basically the grift, and then how how those his friends basically got in and figured out how to hit it. And like you said, it was very interesting to see all these different narration styles and art styles. Like the first one was like a news article, like you were reading I think it was like a newspaper retelling of the crime, which I thought was really interesting. And then he switches to a very interesting, I've never seen this cartoony style from Darwyn. But again, I thought it was great. And this is probably very similar to what his storyboards would look like for maybe like when he was retelling the New Frontier or something like that. Little tiny images, And he gets a lot across. This is the one I liked the most, by the way, the numbers game here. I thought that was a really interesting grift. Anyway, but it's a great book. It really is. I can't say enough. I can't sing enough praises for it. Those first two. The other ones, I took notes on all of them that I read, but it really wasn't. They didn't grab my attention. The story was not engaging enough. It was cool that it was Parker. Like you said, it would have been great to see him adapt more. This is all we have. But again, if you're trapped in Desert Island or you're going back to Hawaii, just take the first two volumes. You don't need all four.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like I said, I mean, I think they all read well. They're all worthwhile. The first two, like you said, definitely grab you more. There's more substance. They're personal stories. Whereas the latter two, volume 3 is really just this heist. And again, it's a cool concept where they're knocking off this copper mining town. But most of it is really just putting the heist together, putting together the team, making the plan, which I do. And you see elements of that in all 4 books. Well, maybe not so much the last one, but that takes a little different turn. But that I really did like overall across the books, the strategy involved in these heists. Like it was a lot of fun. But with the volume 3, I was like very deep into it, and I'm like, they're going to be like any kind of twist or anything? Like they're putting together the heist and it's going great. I'm like, all right. And then, I guess, normally we do give spoilers in these episodes, and we already have given a bunch. I mean, I guess, I'm assuming maybe not everyone listening has read this, so I mean, I won't lay out every single beat, but
sorry, by the way, to everybody.
No. Again, these are a decade old. I think it's fair game, but basically, one of the people goes off the reservation. Turns out he had an ulterior motive, and that's finally our little bit of a twist. But it's very close to the end, and so that one was like pretty straightforward, as opposed to the others where we're bouncing back and forth in time as well. He used that device a lot in the first two, which was really interesting. So yeah, just a different flavor with volume 3. And then yeah, volume 4, the shortest one, where he and a couple of guys are pulling a job in Buffalo, and there's a car accident, and he gets, he runs into this abandoned amusement park to hide out, and he's dealing with the local criminal element and corrupt cops, and he basically Home Alones them.
Exactly.
He's like going through the amusement park
Yeah.
and rigging all of these different attractions. Again, it was fun, in its own way, but yeah, definitely that was a real quick one.
Right. I didn't catch that it was just like Home Alone, but you say that, and it's 100% right. It was like watching Home Alone.
But it was great because like he goes into the funhouse mirror room,
Oh, and then
right? And
he paints the dots on all the windows. Yeah.
Right.
It's like,
And then
I
when
shot
the
the
guy
one that
walks
wasn't.
in,
Yeah.
exactly, he knows to shoot the guy who doesn't have the
Yeah,
so it was
good.
really cool. But it
Yeah.
definitely had that Home Alone that Home Alone feel to it. I'll also say, as far as things that it brought to mind, did you ever watch White Collar, the USA series with Matt Bomer?
No, I know that you like the White Collar though, back in the day.
Yes. Yes. It's a great show. What reminded me most of White Collar was really in the opening chapter of the first book, when and you alluded to this, when he is able to go into the bank and pretend he's someone else and get them to give him a checkbook.
What a great grift! Now, obviously,
yeah.
it wouldn't work nowadays, but back then, I guess you just walk in with a driver's license, and if you have an account there, yeah. So basically, he would just go into each one of the banks and say, "Hey, this is my, I'm looking for my account. Here's my driver's license."
Yeah, right. Like he gets his fake ID and he goes with the name Edward Johnson, right? Generic enough that if you go to enough and you see him, that's what's so cool about, like, he goes to all these different banks.
He goes to 4
right?
banks.
And
yeah.
And it's like eventually, you're going to find one of them that has an Edward Johnson, and they're like, "Oh, here you go, sir." Oh yeah, that's the other thing. I mean, this is set in the 60s, but these stories are so cool. I mean, yeah, that's one instance where that probably wouldn't fly today.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I mean, I felt like these were pretty timeless. I didn't feel like, I mean, and there were, for most of the stories, I wasn't even thinking like, oh yeah, we're in the 60s. Like it didn't play a huge role.
But yet he perfectly sets it up that it's the 60s, right? I mean,
yes.
the art on the walls to the dresses the girls are wearing to, everything screams 1960s.
Yeah. But it's like the themes of, loyalty and betrayal, are so timeless, and the way they play out. And I think these books, they really reveal a lot. I mean, they're not optimistic takes, but I think they show you a lot about the human condition and, what motivates people. And you see story after story of, of people selling each other out, for, out of fear, or out of, for money or sex, or, it's really interesting.
Talking about the human condition, I had some notes. The novel brings up the idea of identity a lot, right? So, obviously he's a dead man come back to life. He has multiple names. He's gone by Parker. You said Edward Johnson. He also, when he went to prison, had his own name, Ronald Casper, and is brought up several times in the book. If I'm caught again for killing this girl at the salon, they'll find the prince and they'll find Ronald Casper. That's my, and he keeps saying that's my prison name, as if in some cases, like some identity, or maybe your self-identity is a prison of some sort. I don't know. There was something there that if I was an English professor, I'm not. Maybe there's something to write about, but certainly a lot of things about the human condition, and when you're a certain element of society where you kill the sex and everything else is all intertwined. You see what these guys are made out of, and a lot of them, they're very bad people. The guy Mal that basically stole his wife and convinced the wife, he's a fucking prick. I hope I could say that.
Go for it.
But both in the novel and in the graphic novel, he does like terrible things to women, and he is again. Parker is this really bad guy, but then when he's up against this other guy he's trying to kill, you're like, well, the other guy's worse, like much worse, right? So it's justified, right? And so there was some interesting things there. I also want to note, if I'm allowed to, there was one interesting thing that Darwyn.
It's so funny. I feel like listeners are going to be like, "Man, Anthony must be so strict. Like, what kind of instructions does he give the guests ahead of time?" Like, is it okay? Am I allowed? It's like, yeah, it's fine.
Anthony does
some kind of monster.
No, I'm sorry. So in the book, when he finally gets Mal and he kills him, right? So he strangles him in the novel the same way. But Darwyn has Parker spit on him. That's not in the book. Not in the book. I thought that was a really interesting inclusion by Darwyn. Again, so much. I mean, this guy is so bad, and we know it as the readers. You know, Parker knows it, and he spits on him like the ultimate insult. You kill him by strangulation, so personal, and then he spits on him. Awful.
That's Yeah, that's interesting to know that was
Not in the
an
novel.
addition. Yeah, very, very interesting. And again, going back to this idea of the human condition, again, there were a lot of names in this. I don't know, was it Handy? One of his Parker's crew, who was a loyal, like, good guy, was willing to go with him to help him take out Bronson, the top outfit guy, right? Yeah. And Parker offered him a split. Like, this wasn't a job where they were there to steal. Like, this was revenge.
Right.
But he offered him a split, and the guy was like, no, like, I'm willing to do it, like, to help you. And Parker doesn't like that.
Yeah.
He feels like he's gone soft. Like, that's not what we do.
Right, exactly right. I mean, I feel like these guys live by a code, just like you were saying. Like, the finger gets 10%. Like, it's assumed that if you're going to pull this job with me, this is the payout. And so I guess it's a foreign concept almost to them to do something for free,
Yeah.
or just because they're friends, or maybe Parker doesn't want to have friends. I don't know, but Handy seems like a nice guy. Actually, he in the book.
Yeah, I like Handy, and I like what's his name, Grofield. Who's the actor?
Oh yeah. I don't remember.
I think it's Grofield, right?
Yeah.
I
think you're right. Yeah,
because that was one of the really funny bits, I thought, in the score, where again they're knocking off this town.
Yeah.
And so he's at the phone company, and they have all the female operators.
And then
there. Yeah, and he starts a relationship with one of the hostages.
I love it. Yeah, it was such a great scene. And then, like, he gets the girl. They're all like leaving the town, and he's like, "The girls come with us." Parker's not gonna like this. It's so wonderful. The other thing is in the score, a lot of the guys in his crew are notable comic book artists. So I thought that was really cool as well. So you have Reverend Dave Johnson looks just like him. There he is, right there. Phil Noto is represented. Although it doesn't really look like Phil, for those of you guys who know Phil. But who looks identical to him is Jim Steranko. Do you guys do you remember the scene where you see him for the first time?
Not offhand.
Do you know Jim Steranko?
I mean, but yeah. I mean, not personally, but
yeah,
but yeah, like seeing it.
Yeah. That is Jim Steranko, 110%. And I just think it's great. Darwyn had a great job with that. And Jim Steranko goes to every comic book convention wearing a suit. So there he is wearing a suit. Everybody else is pretty casual. Jim Steranko wearing the suit.
And which one is that? Is that the score?
That's the score. Yeah.
That's the score, yeah. And then so so there is a character playing poker in the outfit named Clancy.
Right. He calls out to Clancy, and I assume that's also Jim. But then at the end in Slayground, Clancy is somewhere here, but I couldn't figure out where Clancy is.
Clancy's like very prominent
in this.
Yeah. Let me see if I can try to dig it out real quick. Oh man, there was one panel, and I meant to take a picture of it, but
it looks just like Jim, huh?
Yeah.
Well, because like this right here, this is my buddy Randy House, 110%. And so you look at that, you're like, oh my god. And I guess the other guy with him is Ben DeFeo, who's also in this. But if you go
to page 47 of Slayground, unless I'm mistaken, I don't know Jim as well as you do, but I'm pretty sure that's Jim Clancy.
Oh my goodness, that's totally him. Jim, if you're listening, he did a great job. I hope you own this page, Jim. I really do.
Yeah, going back to Jim Clancy. So, like I said, I know him, but yeah, I mean, I haven't seen or spoken to him in years. I knew him as a customer at Alternate Realities. He would come in, I'd ring him up, we'd chat briefly. I mean, it wasn't that involved of a friendship, but we remained Facebook friends. And I know when I posted that we were doing this, or I think it was actually your post of yourself reading the books, he commented, and I think he asked why I chose to do this, and I shared what I did at the top of this episode, that it's stuff I've been meaning to finish all these years, and I thought it would be cool to shine a light on something other than New Frontier, which has been discussed plenty. And so now you said you were not able to connect with Jim.
It's just a crazy week. I wanted to talk to him. I would think he would have an interesting perspective. I'm sure he picked Darwyn's brain on a number of occasions regarding Parker. One of the things that you might not know is at Heroes Con, Jim Clancy was part of the Dinner Jacket Club, and it was a bunch of guys. And on Saturday night at Heroes Con, there's an art auction, and at the art auction, if you were part of this club, I never got inducted to this club. I'm, always a little hurt about that. But they got you a dinner jacket that was like a 1960s. You were like in Las Vegas dinner jacket, and you would walk in. And I remember distinctly the year that Darwyn was there. They inducted him into the dinner jacket club, and he walks in. They're all getting drunk together. It was such a great. It was like a ball to see them because it was like the Rat Pack. It was like the guys that you know and love from the. Because again, Heroes Con's like a family con. Guys like Jim Clancy, Ben DeFeo, and Randy House, who are in this, are like the characters of the ball. Everybody goes there to like hang out with these guys. And to see Darwyn as one of them was just like, it was like Sinatra walking in with the Rat Pack. It was like the coolest thing. But so yeah, Jim is a very good friend, was a very good friend of Darwyn's. And so I think he would have had a very good perspective had I got in touch with him.
Well, listeners, you might have heard it. Sorry. Well, I didn't. I mean, in retrospect for myself, I could have reached out to him and asked, but, I guess the one thing I'd be curious, and I could probably guess the answer. It's like, it must've been so cool to see himself, brought to life as a comic book character,
Absolutely. I can only imagine. Have you ever been written into a comic?
No.
No?
Have you? No?
My name appeared in a comic once. Stefan Rue put me on a cover once. I wrote an article, and apparently in the newspaper. I don't even remember what comic book it is, but he remember it was like me, Jason Schackner, a bunch of people had the bylines of this paper. It was kind of fun.
Nice.
And I remember seeing that. It's just like, huh.
It's cool. I mean,
the closest
the closest I've come is my buddy Greg Schiegel. He does a graphic novel series called Pix, and in volume 2, in the background of one of the scenes, there's a bunch of titles on a shelf, and My Comic Shop History, the title of my other podcast, is there.
That's
and
incredible.
That was very cool. Yeah, no, that was really cool to see. And I'm trying to remember, I don't think he told me ahead of time, or he might have said like, oh, I think he was like, oh, it's in there somewhere. It's like,
go for it.
Looking through it, yeah. No, it's cool because like being a fan of these characters, or these comics, this medium, and then being in it in some way.
I have to imagine.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah.
I want to circle back to the sex because I know you said that he Cook toned a lot down, and I think that was probably the right call. I mean, these are still not. I still wouldn't give these books to a little kid, but from what you're saying, I think it's definitely more sanitized while still being plenty gritty, in the graphic novels. But yeah, we do get some insight. That's a recurring theme throughout these books, the sort of the rhythm and the pattern of Parker's sex life, where
he's got a heist and he can't think about sex until the end of the heist. And then once that's over, he's like, it's time. And he gets the first girl that's there. And that's basically the theme. And I think all of those novels, he just grabs the first girl. I loved at the end of one of them where he's like, I got to go back down to Miami with Brett, but this casino is right over there, and and he finds the girl. And you don't get to see that scene, but
right.
you know what he's going to do. And so yeah, I think it's sanitized because I mean these were never sealed, I don't think, right? And so it's to prevent anybody from just flipping through and seeing it. But yeah, there's a fair amount of sex, which I think goes with the violence, hand in hand, not only in these books but also the genre. I think it speaks to the genre, sex and violence here.
Yeah, for sure. What else did you have in your notes?
No, I think that's everything I wanted to talk about. Let's see. No, I mean, I definitely wanted to bring up the differences between the two, and I feel like I definitely talked at length about some of them. Some of the scenes that I really enjoyed, I feel like I brought up a lot of those scenes. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know if you have anything more to add, other than these are definitely, I would recommend these books, hands down, to anybody interested in Darwyn Cooke, but also interested in stories like this. So, for example, if I was working at the comic shop and somebody said, hey, I just read 100 Bullets, I really loved 100 Bullets with something similar to that, I'd be like, get these Parker books because you're going to love them. I think they're the same genre. Or they really like Torpedo by Jordi Brunet, for example, another book about like a mafia hitman in like the 1930s. It goes hand in hand with like the character Parker. This would be, I would definitely a natural extension if you like those types of books.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they really are great reads. I mean, anyone who's listening to this who hasn't read, any or all of these, I really do recommend them. They were a lot of fun. I mean, again, we hit on really a lot of the main ideas and the themes that I wanted to talk about. I mean, as far as other bits and things like that I really enjoyed. Um, I liked when, again, in the outfit, when this whole network of criminals, they're hitting all of the outfit operations, and then Bronson is getting filled in, right? The top guy, he's hiding out at his wife's house in Buffalo,
Playing Monopoly.
playing Monopoly with the bodyguards, which was great. That was so great when Parker and Handy, I think, were like casing out the joint.
Yeah.
It's like, they're just playing Monopoly.
Playing Monopoly night after night.
But I like when one of the underlings, is it the accountant? But like one of the underlings comes and is filling Bronson in on like how much they've been hit for and everything.
Right.
And he shares with Bronson, he's like, we've done too good a job of having legitimate fronts, because he's like, the people, I mean, treating this like a corporation, because the
People don't fight
people
back.
who work for us,
Yeah.
they think they're working at a corporation. Like, they don't fight back. They waited a really long time before even thinking to call us. Like, I thought that was funny.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's not something you think about. Like, it's such a well-run organization that the people who worked there didn't know that they worked for an illegal operation. They were just counting the money. They were doing this or that. I thought that was good. Another scene that made me think about, not that it's related to what we just talked about, but with the guy Sedgwick. So again, when he's looking for this guy Mal, he happens upon this guy Sedgwick who owns a used car dealership, it looks like, or something. And, he gets the information where Mal is. And then later on, at the end of that scene, he's like, don't tell Mal I'm looking for him, right? But then obviously Sedgwick does tell Mal. And then later on, after he kills Mal, he goes and kills Sedgwick. And he goes back, he's like, you told me that you weren't going to tell Mal. Now you're dead. And I just, I really enjoyed the full circle there. It's like, and I forgot what he said to him. It's like, well, this serves you right, basically. It's like, you broke your promise.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, right, it's the code that this character has. I mean, again, he's a criminal. He's doing very bad things, and he's killing people over the course of this book. But again, relatively within this world of criminals, he does have his code, and he, if that guy had kept his word, and
he says it right there,
and
you
no more favors,
no more favors,
right? And so if he had just kept his word,
he would be dead. He would be fine right now.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think, again, we hit on, I think, really a lot of my favorite moments. But yeah, when he's working his way up the ladder of the outfit and, confronting the higher ups and getting the even higher ups on the phone. And I mean, he kills one of the guys when he's on the phone.
Oh my gosh. When I see that scene, I was like, you can't even believe it. Because it's not common. It's just not common, in any sort of media movie. You wouldn't see that. That's just, like you said, he's got big balls. He really does. Yeah. It was the guy Carter, I think, right? It was Carter. He goes to the guy Carter's office, just shoots him right in the head.
Yeah.
And then he gets on the phone with the guy. He's like, I just killed Carter. I'm coming after you now.
Yeah. But I think that really, tells you a lot about the character. It's like when he says he's going to do something, he does it.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, the way he was able to work his way up the ladder was great. And then, so he is ultimately able to get the outfit to pay him the money that Mal had stolen from him, right? By threatening to call open season. This is in the first book, right? He threatens to call open season on all their operations, and they finally agree to pay him off. But then they try to double cross him.
Oh,
right?
At the train station.
Yeah. And it's really kind of like a funny sequence. It's like
when he gets the guy with the Coke, he's like, next time take a drink every now and then.
Yeah, it's like a real giveaway if you're standing at a train station in the middle of the night holding a can of soda.
It's a great scene. It's a really good scene. And again, it speaks to like the fact that he's a hardened criminal, and he knows what to look for. He's careful, and he can case the situation. He understands what's going on. He's careful.
Yeah, but it's great. I mean, it's like just instance after instance of them trying to get one over on him, and he's just like, he keeps sending them back, and until finally he gets the money. Yeah, it was there. Did you? Because again, so over the course of all four books, again, less so Slayground, because that starts with the heist. They're knocking off an armored car, and then we're into the amusement park. But with the other books, a bunch of heists. Were there any that you were like, of the ones that Parker was involved in and planned and pulled off? Were there any that, or did you have a favorite out of all the heists?
I don't think I have a favorite, or I can think of one that was particularly great. The first one, it's the one where they're on that island and they all have machine guns and they're trying to, they're shooting their way out essentially. That was fine. I don't like that so much as that story of revenge that was in there, right? The heists were a necessary part of the story because that's what he was. He was a criminal. He was working a heist, and these books were basically how the heist went bad after, and the cleanup essentially. And I enjoyed that aspect of the works more than anything else. What about you? What was your favorite heist that he was involved in?
I like the diner, the armored truck at the diner.
Oh yeah, with the
You know,
that little guy that brings him in to the thing. That was also a very interesting tale as well, and again, he read the situation right away. He's like, this woman who sets this up, he's going to double cross everybody, and she does.
yeah. Yeah, so that was right. Refresh my memory. Despite having just read them, but there were a lot of characters.
I know,
and a lot
so
of,
much.
We were jumping around a lot.
It's meaty.
Was that Slim Lesker? Was that the character?
Yeah, I think I have all their names. Hold on. Let's see. That was definitely in the score.
Or no, that was the outfit. I thought.
I think it was Chet. No, it wasn't the outfit. That was in the score, wasn't it? Oh no, you're right. It was in the outfit. My mistake.
Okay.
It was at the again. I read them too within the last week, and it's like now they're all like one almost.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the guy's name was Slim. This little poor little dude.
Yeah, right. But this woman at the diner, right, tells him about this, this money truck that passes by, every Thursday or whatever, and the guys come in, and so they come up with this plan, and they box in the truck, but yes, Parker correctly identifies that the diner woman is going to betray them, and he's able to anticipate that and get ahead of it, but yeah, it was cool. I mean, yes, I agree. I mean, it was really just, the heists are a means to an end, right? And they're not really what these are about. I mean, it's really more the themes of revenge and survival in the last story. But
well, they're all about survival.
But it was fun. Like I really thought the heists were a lot of fun. It was cool again to see the strategy and to see the way all of that came together. I wanted to I mean, I know obviously we've been talking about the art, but what about the color scheme of these books? What thoughts do you have about that?
Well, Darwyn was very monochromatic when he did his artwork. I mean, the art piece that I have, obviously very similar to the color of the third book, right? Because he would use the blues, the yellows. I don't remember, was New Frontier similar to that at all? No, that was full color.
No, that was full color.
Yeah, but it's very common in his own convention art. So it was interesting to see it represented here. Although, did he do the art? Was it Dave Stewart who did the art, or the colors? Sorry, because it looks like
I believe for these he did everything.
Okay, fair enough. I like it. I mean, I think that again, it was almost as if you were reading or watching a black and white movie, right? It's just in the first couple, and I think the third one they were blue, and the third one was yellow. Not a big deal.
Yeah.
But I think it would have a whole different tone had it been purely in black and white and had it purely been in color, right? I think it works to the story a little bit, for sure.
Yeah. No, overall, I would say it was cool. It was interesting, like reading the first one in particular, it took me a minute just to get into the rhythm and the style of it. And once I did, I mean, I was really on board, but, with the lack of full color, especially when you have like a bunch of Caucasian guys in suits shooting at each other, there were a few instances where I was like, all right, I want to make sure I'm tracking all of this properly. But no, all in all, I think it worked well, and I think you're right. I think had it been fully black and white or fully color, I'm sure. I mean, it still would have been enjoyable. But I think this was a nice, a nice in between.
Yeah. Absolutely. And again, I don't know so much about 1960s era stuff, although I do collect a lot of artwork from that era and before it. And so I don't know if a monochromatic palette like this where they just used the one color to advantage was common, and maybe that was what he was picking up on in that type of theme where he wanted to set it in the 60s. This is maybe thematically would go with a book that was from the 60s. I don't know. I couldn't answer that, but it could be, his choice there, or it could just been the publisher. It's like, hey, you want to do this? We can't do a full color, and it costs $15. It's going to be $50. Right. Who knows?
I'm trying to remember, and I don't know if you do. Do you remember what the reaction was to these, at alternate realities at the time? Or I guess you had moved by that point, right? You said?
Right. So I was living in 2009. I would have been living in Philadelphia, so I was not working at the store all the time, but I was coming and going, and I definitely was ordering still the book. So I picked this up for sure at the store. I don't remember what the reaction was. This was definitely after his New Frontier stuff, and I believe a lot of people were Darwyn Cooke fans from, like you said, Selena's Big Score and stuff like New Frontier, I don't think this would have resonated with people as much. Certainly the people who are reading his superhero stuff. I don't even think, correct me if I'm wrong, that his later stuff on the Spirit, I don't even think that was very popular either amongst people at the store. Now, I mean, I'm not talking about people in general. I'm talking about just our close-knit comic book shop. I don't think they sold well, if I remembered correctly.
Yeah, again, I don't remember super specifically, but I think that's about right. And with the Parker books, I mean, again, it's been a while. I don't really just remember there being a ton of discussion about it. Maybe there was, and I just wasn't there for it. But I certainly hope there was, and I mean, I certainly know that we had it at the store, and I hope it was well received because they're really terrific. And it's been such a blast having this conversation. One of the thing that really breaks your heart is you get to the end of Slayground, and you like right at the end it says Parker will return in 2015. And of course that wouldn't come to pass. So it's such a shame, not because of the book, because of the man and his life, of course, but
right.
But that really, when I saw that, I was like, oh man, really like a punch to the gut. But yeah, I mean, it would have been wonderful to see him do more of these. Although I don't know, selfishly, it's like, because I know these take time for him to do. So it's like, I don't know, I don't know that I would have wanted him, just doing, because there was so much. Like, that's the thing. There was so much that I would have loved to see him do.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know how many Parker novels there are. I know there's much more than these 4 books. It's also interesting that no other artists have picked it up. Something like, an artist's death is not very common that I know of, like a young guy like Darwyn. I mean, I think he was in his 50s, but relatively young to the comics world, right? And so it's surprising almost that who put these out? IDW. Interesting that they didn't contact somebody who does something similar. Like, hey, let's do the next Parker that he would have done, and continue it on. So maybe they really weren't big sellers for the company, and so they weren't worth pursuing beyond that. But they were doing it because it was Darwyn, and it was what Darwyn wanted to work on.
Yeah. Well, listen. I appreciate you taking the time to read these books and the book itself. I think that's really cool.
My privilege.
So you and I are gonna. That's awesome. So you and I are gonna do a Patreon bonus episode of Extra Credit, the My Comic Shop Book Club companion podcast, and we're gonna talk about 3 issues of Jonah Hex that Darwyn Cooke drew. 2 issues of Jonah Hex and 1 issue of All-Star Western featuring Jonah Hex. And they were a lot of fun to read. I'm excited to talk about that with you. So if anyone wants to listen to us talk about that or watch us in the video version, that'll be on my Patreon page 2 days after this episode comes out. And, man, if you're game, I'd love to have you back down the line to talk other Darwyn Cooke works, or others. Doesn't have to be Darwyn Cooke, but
anytime. I have an extensive collection of stuff. I don't know if you've ever read Hellboy or Sin City. Great books in their own right. I mean, I have a whole nother.
I mean, I've read the goddamn Batman. Is that
oh
is that
my
sufficient?
Goodness! If you ever want to, I would love to talk to you more about some of the offbeat superhero stuff or the independent stuff. That's really what I started. Like I said, I started falling into in my comics journey, and I gravitate still to those books. I pick up a Batman book every now and again, but I don't feel like the stories are what they used to be when Frank Miller was doing it, or something like that. So. I would love to be on the show again, Anthony, anytime. Just you name your book, I'll read anything.
Right on. No, I appreciate that. And I will take you up on that. And, look, as you know, and I think as listeners have gotten a sense, I mean, my tastes generally comic book wise do lean superhero. That being said, I mean, I love something like Gotham Central, which is set in the superhero world, but really does its own thing.
Yeah.
But
I've never read that, actually.
Oh, you would love it.
Let's do that.
I really think you would love it.
You want to do that?
I'm game. I think there might be some others vying for that spot, but the series is long. No. The series is long enough that we'll. I was planning to do it in multiple episodes anyway. So but I think you would love it. But what I was going to say is that reading this in particular, and this is our first non-Marvel, non-DC reading selection for this book club, and I loved it. Hopefully listeners, reviewers have enjoyed, and so this is definitely definitely inspired me to try to seek out other stuff beyond. I have a lot of superhero stuff that I want to work through that's on my list, but I'm definitely open to other works as well. And if there anything in the vein of this, I think I would dig it. So
Anthony, take a look at 100 Bullets. You will not be disappointed. It's Eduardo Rizzo and who's the other guy who did it?
Azzarello, right?
Brian Azzarello was the did the writing, and so if you like them, any of their superhero stuff, which I think they did a Joker story, they might have done a Batman story, really gritty in this kind of almost the world of Parker. That book 100 Bullets is very similar to that. You might like it.
Right on. Well, Bill, thank you very much. This really was I was looking forward to this all week.
Yeah.
I was excited to talk about Parker, but I was really more just excited to talk to you, just to see you. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for this. Thank you to everyone who checked out the episode. Again, we have our Patreon bonus episode coming out in 2 days. We'll be back with an all new episode in 2 weeks. And until then, remember, they're all imaginary stories. My Comic Shop Book Club is a Flat Squirrel production. Art by Kristen San Gregorio, music by Basic Printer. If you like what you heard, be sure to check out my other podcasts, Digging for Kryptonite and My Comic Shop History. Sign up for exclusive content, including the official book club companion podcast, at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato, and watch my documentary film, My Comic Shop Country, out now on Apple TV and Amazon.